Ivan had just started to play the opening and immediately lost. What? How could this happen? Of course it would, Ivan. You moved out your queen this early. Ivan learned some basic chess opening principles, and using them his rating skyrocketed like never before. If only we could have shown you this before. By the end of this video, you will have what it takes in order to win more chess games as a complete beginner. If you're, for example, 600, 700 rated player, this video will show you the most common problems that a lot of chess beginners have when they're starting out. So let me show you this in a beginner example that was played by a beginner and a not beginner. So e4, e5, knight f3, but then Black decides to do a move like f6. I want to ask you a question. What do you think? And you can see the computer says it is a mistake. What do you think as a beginner that moves like this, f6, c6, like these? Why do you think these moves are considered a mistake by the computer when you're just moving one pawn forward or the rear pawn? So for example, it would be most likely the same for h5, a5. What do you think the problem is with these types of moves? The problem is simple. What these moves are doing is that they are not grasping what is called control over the center. Let me show you. Why is this? Imagine putting a bishop. Why is this? I'm just showing you so that you'd understand why that's the case. Imagine putting a bishop here versus, for example, putting a, you know what, not a bishop, let's put a knight here. Let's put another knight in here. If the knight is on d5, it controls obviously more squares on most cases than the knight on a1. That's just how it overall happens for most pieces. Thus, because of this reason, it is obviously considered more powerful because it controls more squares. It will aim, for example, against a pawn here, pawn there. Of course, in theory, that's like overall in, not in a specific example, but in most examples. Okay? Now, using what we've talked about in this, the center in most games, for example, in the game that we've just saw, is also the most important. Thus, the computer says to you, as a beginner, you need to move a knight first, not the pawn. That's why the computer says moving a knight here is the correct move and not moving the pawn. This question mark is a mistake in chess. It's when the computer says a move is a mistake. Seeing it from here, you can see a plus 1.97 advantage for white. That means basically that white is nearly winning because of one move that black had made, which was wrong. Because now what you're also doing in effect is will prevent the knight from getting here. This knight now controls more squares in comparison overall than the other knight. Continuing from this move right here, let me show you how the game continues and how white becomes more and more and more winning, just as an example. And we'll see then also an actual in-game example of this. Anyways, knight to h6, and notice how the bar goes even higher in the favor of white. Notice also how this is also just as a mistake. There is a saying that says basically knights in the rear are dim. The whole idea is a knight here will control very little squares, almost the same as putting it on the edges of the board, as we've just talked about. And then bishop to c4, again, regular development, and black does d6. This whole idea of not moving the pieces towards the side of the board but to the center is part of, and also moving them out in the first place instead of just moving a bunch of pawns, is what is called opening principles. What you actually want to do in the opening, and also what you don't want to do and what you want to avoid and punish. Let me give you a few examples. All of them under the all four, like these opening principles and rules, like these ones, they fall under the 10 move rule. Basically, what you say is that by the point that I reach 10 moves, I see on the side of the board 10 moves that I have made. I have moved all of my pieces out, or at least 4 of them, these pieces. Okay, 1, 2, I have castled. 3, I have a lot of control over the center. So for example, this and this. Let me show you an example. Bishop to c4, it is the 3rd move of the game. Let's say from a moment that white does another okay move to here. continue using the 10 move rule. Knight to c3, knight's here, bishop here. Now what do we have left? We have left moving the bishop out and castling. All of this was done in 4 moves. So by 10, of course, it is very realistic. Let's say for a moment then, for example, doesn't really matter, say bishop here, and then we castle. Okay? We have achieved 3 of the 4 ideas that we had. Remember what we had. We wanted to move pawns towards the center. Okay? Pawns towards the center. Castle. Okay? Develop all of our pieces is what we haven't yet achieved. And also the 4th one that I forgot to mention is to connect the rooks. You move the queen slightly. Why slightly and not like by a lot? I'll show you in a few minutes why. That is basically the 10 move rule. Okay? And it helps you a lot in order to understand what you should do in the opening. Say for a moment they will castle. We will do then this. Okay? We'll develop pieces as usual. And by about move 6 or 7, we've almost achieved everything that we had to in the opening. These are kind of like objectives that you do in the opening. And again, remember this. 1, take grasp over the center, okay? Develop all of your pieces, all of them, like all of them. I mean all of them. 3, castle. 4, connect the rooks. Connecting them is meaning that once these 2 pieces will move out, once these pieces move out, the rooks will be able to kind of like see each other in a way. That's the idea. Now that is the 10 move rule and the opening principles. What we should do when we just start out to play the game. What's the opposite of the opening principles? They're obviously the principles that we need to avoid, the things we should not do, and the things we should punish when we see them. Let me give you an example. Let's say for a moment that we have an empty board, okay? A completely empty board, e4 just started, and then say for a moment we do e5, okay? e5, we develop the knight, sweet. But then again, they wouldn't do a move that helps them, as the opponents, take over these 4 squares, the center, especially our side of them. Let's say for a moment they wouldn't do a move like this because of it, developing and taking. And instead of this, they're doing a move that makes quite less sense in the idea. For example, a6, or moves like this, a6, a5, moves like this. You see how the bar goes in our favor, first of all, because we can take, but if not, if for example, it would have been like this, it is also the same thing. Now let's take a look into another example, and we're gonna see shortly how it affects the game itself and how it makes it a lot easier. So e4, c5. c5 is okay. Like, why is this one okay and not, for example, moves like this? This is part of an opening. An opening is a sequence of moves that you have already planned, and it makes the game a lot easier for you later on. So this part is from an opening that is called the Sicilian. As a beginner, do not try to play this opening. It is very complicated. And the beginners did, and you are gonna see how it affects the game. So c5, c4, again, attacking like more grasp over the center, which is what we want. d6, d6, okay. It's not a part of the opening anymore, but okay. But it's still fine. Knight c3. And then black made a slight mistake. He made the move e6. What have we just talked about? We need to take over these 4 squares as beginners. When you're doing a move to e5, e6, excuse me, it doesn't really affect it that much. Moves that are doing this, right? Moving here, there, like as further that you can from the center, are usually less and less correct. In this example, you can see that the computer immediately just suggests, and it just says it very clearly. You wanna hop in with the knight and do what we've just talked about. Now, say for a moment that you are facing this. Say, for example, that we are white in this example. How are we going to react to a move like this? The way that we're going to react, and this is the answer to this question, is immediately trying to move a pawn towards the center if you haven't yet, or just again trying to take over the center if you can. This is what is called striking in the center, moving a pawn directly in front of the opponent. What he's going to do now, obviously, he will have to take. Our queen will obviously take back, If he progresses with the knight, it's okay. We'll just move one square back, and it's very problematic for him to make threats over the queen. But notice what happens then. He's having a very hard time to move his own pawns forward, especially this d6 knight, which is striking in the center. It's making his pawns more difficult to maneuver. What have we talked about so far? One, we've talked about the basic opening principles, what to do in the beginning of the game, taking over the center, controlling it with pieces, aka developing them, and castling. We have also talked about some of what we shouldn't do in the opening, which is mostly regarded to the stuff you should avoid and punish, which is mostly the exact opposite. So, for example, moving pieces towards the rear, okay? And whenever you see, for example, someone that does a move like knight to h6 in here, your immediate reaction should be, how can I take more stuff from him? How can I take more control over the center? And how can I punish things like this? So, for example, in here, the funniest thing is that the computer suggests that you should take, because then after he will take with the pawn, he'll have double pawns on the edge, but it's not for now. Developing is also just as good back then, but no, to avoid these at all cost. What to avoid? We've talked about the 10 move rule, what you should achieve by the first 10 moves of each chess game. And also, we've talked a little bit about what openings are. So what are you gonna take from this into actual games? When, for example, you're gonna go back to Lichess and chess.com and play against actual people. First and foremost, all of this is under the 10 move rule. So literally, if you wanna have the most ROI from this video, first of all, subscribe, because then you'll see more like this. But also, in actuality, to get the most ROIs, take a piece of paper. Let me show you. An actual piece of paper, and write on it these ideas down. This is probably the most effective way to actually memorize it into actual games. And again, the 10 move rule. 1. By move 10, I 1, and we'll remove these. By 10 moves, I 1. Took control over the center, or at least have pawns there that take control over it. Developed all of my pieces, so all the knights, the bishops. Third, I then castled, okay? And the fourth one is I moved the queen slightly and helped the rooks to develop, okay? That is the opening principles, and very simple on what you should achieve by the first 10 moves of every single game. It is very simple once you're remembering these moves, it's very easy to follow the basic principles of the opening and avoiding all the rest that you should once you're following this basic 10 move rule. And lastly, we've talked about what openings are. I will suggest you also to pause the video and type in a browser above this video what is called the Italian game and the Caro-Kann. These are two opening sequences. One, the Italian is for white, the Caro-Kann is for black. And they are very, very simple to learn and memorize when you're just a beginner. That's it for today's video. If you've taken value from this video, there is also down below two options where I can help you more in chess. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.